Welcome to Resource PNG. Communities from Lealea, Porebada, Boera and Papa in Central Province gathered this week to witness the launch of a training manual designed to make the management of schools more effective. The training manual, developed following consultation with representatives from these 4 villages, aims to promote transparency and accountability by school boards of management. It is thought to be the very first homegrown manual of its kind, with PNG LNG project developer ExxonMobil supporting this initiative. For Papua New Guinea, education has long been regarded as the key to the country's future development. In recent years, the national government has placed increasing emphasis on education through programs such as the fee-free education policy. This policy has seen an increase in the number of children who have the opportunity to gain an education within the elementary, primary and secondary school levels. The introduction of this government program has also seen increasing amounts of funding go directly to schools both in urban and rural areas. In every school, a large part of its spending is determined by its Board of Management, or BOM. According to some estimates, there are in excess of 12,500 schools throughout Papua New Guinea to cater for the country's school-aged children. With this large number, the expectation on school boards of management is very high, with an expectation for transparency, accountability and ultimately efficiency. For ExxonMobil, the developers of the PNG LNG project, a commitment to education has been a mainstay in their support towards communities around its project sites. And it has been through working together with communities that the company this week marked a milestone with the launch of the Board of Management Training Manual. Red Scar High School in Porebada, Central Province, was the scene for this event. Representatives from the 4 project villages of Porebada, Boera, Papa and Lealea came together to witness the launch of a training manual developed through a thorough consultative process. The School Board of Management Training Manual was developed through a consultative process facilitated by ExxonMobil through Esmi Sinapa Development Consultancy Services. Esmi Sinapa, who facilitated the development of this manual, spoke of the challenges faced from the early days in getting community leaders from these 4 villages to work together during the planning phase.
When I came to the plant site communities in 2015, I didn't see unity like this. I went to one community to another doing a needs assessment, trying to find out what can we do. We have a golden opportunity with Exxon at our doorstep. What can we do for them to support us to be a resilient and progressive society? They're on our land, but how do we do that and get them to support us to progress? So with the needs assessment, I went around and I realized that many of the communities were not united. Many of the issues were faced by our schools. Many of our schools were closed in half a day. We had a lot of youth not in school. We also having our parents and our citizens not interested in our schools. Our schools were left aside. Those are things that need to be addressed, but you cannot always talk about problems. You must find solutions.
This manual was developed specifically for schools within the PNG LNG project areas. However, ExxonMobil has given its blessing for the manual to be used by the Central Provincial Division of Education to use in other schools within the province. This manual will also be used to develop skills within BOM members of 9 schools within PNG LNG project areas in Hela Province.
We as a company, ExxonMobil, we believe education does drive social and economic development. And I believe most everybody here today believe the same. And our communities, you know, it doesn't matter if it's Papua New Guinea, if it's Canada, if it's wherever in the world, it's all the same. People are people, and we've got the same desires, we've got the same needs. And when we improve living standards, it's kind of, it's why education is so vital to our communities. Because that's where it all starts. Those children in the classrooms today are our future tomorrow. And it's up to us as leaders and adults to make sure that we're providing that to the best of our ability. And it doesn't end. It doesn't end here today. We continually improve as we go.
This School's Board of Management Training Manual represents a bottom-up approach in making school boards of management more effective and is the first that has been developed at the community level. The BOM Training Manual complements the PNG National Education Department's manual for Boards of Management Handbook for elementary, primary and community schools, with a specific focus on upskilling leadership and governance qualities of Board of Management members.
Congratulations to the four communities and those 19 first people who went in. And I believe those were the ones that has kick-started. Their commitment and dedication, they never gave up, irrespective of there was allowance or no cup of coffee. But they continue to remain at Edgewood to continue that. So Esme, thank you very much for identifying the gap. And I believe if it was not for you, I don't think we would have come to this, where we are launching this program.
The BOM manual covers 5 modules that include influential leadership, effective communications, science, technology, engineering and mathematics, education emphasis, good governance, and understanding and application of the Department of Education Board of Management Handbook. You're watching Resource PNG. After the break, we look at the potential of geothermal energy in Papua New Guinea. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Resource PNG. Much has been said about the potential of geothermal energy in Papua New Guinea. Given that PNG sits within the Pacific Ring of Fire, we are fortunate enough to be home to some geothermal spots that can be harnessed to provide energy for communities. Within the mining industry, Lihir Gold Mine on Lihir Island in New Island Province has already taken the lead in harnessing geothermal energy for its needs. But there is so much more potential. Michael Peterson, Director for the Geoscience Division at the Pacific Community, was recently in the country and spoke about the potential that geothermal energy could provide. The potential of utilizing geothermal energy in Papua New Guinea has been brought to the fore in recent times, especially with the government looking to move away from energy from fossil fuels. Within the mining sector, a project which has taken the lead in utilizing alternative energy sources, more particularly geothermal energy, has been Lihir Gold Mine on Lihir Island. This is a point emphasized by Michael Peterson, Director for the Geoscience Division at the Pacific Community. He made these remarks whilst in Port Moresby recently to meet with government on how to harness geothermal energy.
The only Pacific island or Pacific country that has geothermal power is in fact Papua New Guinea, and that's on Lihir, which is north of New Ireland, and that's linked to the mining, which has been going for many years. So on Lihir, they're basically mining a dormant volcano, which is still pretty hot. So because it's hot, they can use the heat to generate steam and drive power. So geothermal energy has many forms, but the form that we are here discussing is the easiest form, and that's the geothermal heat that's linked to volcanoes and volcanic heat. So what you need is a ground source of heat. So this is where under a volcano you have like a magma supply. A magma is where you have liquid rock close to the surface. This is at a temperature of 1,000 degrees centigrade or something like that. It heats water in the upper parts of the crust. That water circulates and it also produces steam. So the geothermal energy will tap that hot water and that steam, which then drives turbines, which then can generate electricity. And the interesting thing is actually you can get it on many scales. The biggest power station in the world, geothermal power station, is in the US, west of the US, and that's 7 terawatts, I believe, which is very much bigger than PNG would need. But on the other hand, I visited one in Japan recently, which is only 250,000 kilowatts, and it's only the size of a football field, and it only costs $1 million to actually develop. So we're talking about village level or groups of village level type developments for that. So all different types of scales of development are possible.
Access to energy is vital, no doubt. However, in Papua New Guinea, providing energy to more than 8 million inhabitants has been a challenge. The national government has recognized this and is now thinking outside the box for ways to provide energy to its people. One of these is to harness the potential of alternative energy sources, including geothermal energy.
So the population of Papua New Guinea is around about 8 million. At the minute, 87% of the population don't really have access to regular electricity. This will change rapidly. You know, the roadmap for Papua New Guinea is to get at least 70% supplied by power by 2030. Now that is an ambitious target and an ambitious roadmap. To get there will require a number of different types of energy source. So we might look at fossil fuels, for example. We will also look at hydropower, which Papua New Guinea has now. There's work going into wind energy. There's certain parts of PNG where wind is a very strong energy, a strong source of energy and a big potential. Europe, for example, has gone very long down the wind power route. And some countries in Europe now, on a good day, can power their whole country from wind. So PNG is rightly looking at that. And the other one is solar power. We all know with our mobile phones these days that battery technology is improving so much now. So batteries can last 8 or 10 hours now. And so I think solar power for lighting in rural communities is going to be a big option moving forwards to at least get lighting to rural communities. But for more energy intensive needs, we're going to need things like geothermal. So geothermal, gas, coal, oil, these are the ones that will be the heavy. These will be the heavy producers of electricity for the base load. And I think it will, about 1/3 of the geography of Papua New Guinea, the area of Papua New Guinea, in theory could be serviced by geothermal power. We'll probably never grid the whole of Papua New Guinea, you know, like we do in the Highlands or like we do in around the capital territory of Port Moresby, where we have actually gridded systems. To do that throughout the whole country is a big ask, and with modern technology might not be needed. A little bit like telephones. In the old days we had to have wires everywhere, and now we're going wireless, so you don't need the grids. Energy is moving a little bit more like that. So we might have lots of microgrids or lots of small grids rather than trying to have one big grid to power the whole country. So I think that, you know, PNG is rightly looking at all of its options, and geothermal power certainly is a possibility. So what we have discussed is setting up such a task force. That was very well received, I think. To get high-level political backing for the task force and the work of the task force, that's work in progress. That we'd like to agree that before we leave, at least to some extent. And then the next thing we'd like to agree in terms of an outcome are what are the steps we can do within the task force. So one would be to get the policy off the ground. Another one would be to attract funding for some of the early parts, the pre-feasibility parts of development. So this is assessing resources, getting in experts from people who've actually developed geothermal power from across the world, getting them in to advise PNG government.
According to Peterson, important steps have been taken by the government in regards to harnessing the potential of geothermal energy. From the regional level, the Pacific community is also supportive of the direction in utilizing alternative energy sources, hence the visit by Peterson to the country recently. During his visit, he was able to meet with representatives from government who had formed a task force to look into the potential of geothermal energy. Among issues discussed, how to go about developing relevant policy as well as sourcing funding to support initiatives to harness geothermal energy for the country into the future. This, he says, are steps in the right direction.
Now, of course, that's in theory, yeah? In practice, probably only part of that could be realised, actualised. But even if it's half or a quarter or even a tenth of that, it's a very significant contribution to the power base. To get geothermal energy off the ground requires a number of things to happen. First of all, it's a knowledge of the resource. And I know that the Mineral Resources Authority here in PNG, they've been working particularly in places like New Britain and Milne Bay and other areas, but those places in particular. And West New Britain, for example, looks very promising as maybe the first area where we could roll out a fairly large power station. Of course, this has got to be decided down the line. So that's one thing, is understanding your resource. The second thing is getting the investment climate right. Papua New Guinea has so much experience in doing this, though, in other areas. Look at your mining industry, which has been going 60 years or so. Some of the biggest world-class mines in the world, working with some of the biggest multinational companies in the world. So the Papua New Guinea government has already proven for decades it can get the investment climate right. If it can do it in one area, there's no reason why it can't do it in other areas. And it is for construction and things like this. So with geothermal energy, probably what we need to look at is, because it cuts across a number of departments, we would need a geothermal committee to get together, which has clout. So it should have the backing of the highest parts of government, the Office of Prime Minister. It should be in the priority plan for the development plan for Papua New Guinea. And yes, the policy needs to be developed. I understand there is a fairly mature policy which has been drafted. This needs to be, I think, agreed at high governance levels within Papua New Guinea, and then it needs to be implemented, to be put into practice, to see if it's a practical policy. And as you know, policy is never written in stone. They're always dynamic documents, and they progress with time. The other area is financing. As with the mining operations, PNG government needs to develop a fiscal climate which is attractive to investors. The biggest risk with geothermal energy is in the drilling. Something like 35 or 40% of the costs of development of a geothermal station are in the drilling. So in other parts of the world, there are schemes where companies can get maybe 40 or 50% of the drilling costs. Not necessarily from the host country. In Africa, for example, there was an African Development Fund which helped get this going, and a number of countries contributed to this fund. And Kenya, as an example, has really benefited from that. And although the upfront costs of geothermal are quite high, the running costs once the plant is up and running are quite low. So over time, you really get your money back. And in theory, it can last forever. You know, volcanoes last at least 1 million years, which is a long time for people in a human time scale. So if we look after the heat and we look after the resource, then the plants can go for decades and hundreds of years in theory. Yeah.
Don't go away. After the break, we take a look at what has been making headlines within the resource sector in Resource News. Welcome back to Resource PNG. Time now to take a look at what has been making headlines in the resource sector.
This morning at a business breakfast hosted by the Business Council of PNG, the private sector was given an outlook of the country's economy over the coming months. The slowdown in the economy has been quite noticeable, with the private sector feeling the brunt of the pinch, especially when dealing with the lack of foreign exchange. Michael Penrose, Business Council Vice President, when addressing the audience, gave some examples of clear indicators of the economic strain.
Indications coming out from Pricewaterhouse, KPMG and Deloitte is that most of their bigger clients are probably down on average about 35% against the same period last year, which is quite significant, you know, when you put it in the context of, you know, where we are at the moment. I suppose it goes without saying that you can imagine what the smaller to medium-sized businesses are probably experiencing, the levels of decline they're probably experiencing. The other key probably indicator that in our last recent consultative session that we had, some of the data coming through from BSB was that FPOS transactions for the last 3 quarters are down about 9%. So probably giving another indicator in terms of consumer sentiment at the moment.
Despite the negative picture painted of the coming months, business houses remain committed to finding solutions during these tough times.
Hard decisions need to be made about stopping things that are actually being funded at the moment. Stopping things that are not yet funded, as in not making promises to spend, is a much easier political outcome than actually trying to stop something that people already have in their pocket or a job that's already created.
According to the Department of Treasury, gradual consolidation will return the economy to a fiscal sustainable path, maintaining debt to GDP at a sustainable level and return to a balanced budget by 2020.
Making sure government provides that enabling environment, continue to invest in infrastructure, and of course look at the enabling regulatory environment that try to support the growth of the private sector. Obviously, we all know is the engine of growth.
Although the medium-term outlook for PNG's economy plans for modest increases in revenue and expenditure until 2020, according to the Asian Development Bank, forward revenue projections may not be realistic without the fiscal consolidation the government has committed to, which may result in PNG likely to miss its fiscal targets.
Basil says it is better to put more effort into maintaining roads and other infrastructure like bridges into resource districts. They are generating the much-needed tax for the government. Basil says the 110-kilometer Leh Bulolo road that starts from the 9-mile road junction to Bulolo station is an economic highway.
The government is right in putting new highways and roads, but isn't it right to make sure that we put proper infrastructures to resource-rich districts where they are generating the much-needed tax for the government to run this country?
Bulolo district is home to big corporate companies like Porebada Mining Joint Venture or MMJV, PNG Forest Products, and Jinek Chicken, who have been paying corporate tax since their establishment. Basil made the comments in light of the recent announcement of the sealing of a new road in Milne Bay Province. The rehabilitation of the East Cape Road is funded through a World Bank credit of 338 million kina, with additional core financial support from the Australian government. It is part of the World Bank's Road Maintenance and Rehabilitation Project 2 of restoring key national roads across Papua New Guinea. The project will include the sealing of the road and improvements to 6 existing bridges, as well as the drainage systems. Lealea MP William Sam, who is an engineer by profession, believes the Leh Bulolo highway will cost an average of 100 million kina.
I think 100 million is not a big ask. We need to bite the bullet, put it there. I will say that we need to also acknowledge Australian government's contribution.
And that brings us to the end of this episode of Resource PNG. As always, if you'd like to get in touch with us on anything regarding the resource sector, please email us on the address now showing on your screen. To view this episode online, log on to the EMTV website where you will find a link to the Resource PNG page. For the latest updates on the resource sector in the country, check out our Facebook page. Until the next time, bye for now.